I'm the Swordless that holds no shield. I journey without a blade in sight. But 5 swords of power I wield, 4 centuries and 1 of greatest might. The Swordless Swordsman is a weapon art build that seeks to use a variety of weapon arts to take down enemies, rather than relying on something like the Moonveil's transient moonlight. Instead, we use multiple weapon arts to create a deadly combo using a mechanic many of you might not know about. Let's start by taking a look at the 3 main ashes of war we're going to use. There will be one more I will introduce later, but these are the 3 important ones. All 3 of our ashes are intelligence-based bullet arts, allowing us to focus investment on just one stat, while not needing a weapon with high AR, as bullet arts are not affected by base AR. This allows us to save a lot of weight, by simply using daggers to hold our weapon arts. Glintblade Phalanx is an amazing ash of war, and does quite a bit of poise damage. Each of the blades do 10 poise damage in PvE, totaling up to 40, which is as much as a Flame of Redmane's. The first thing we have to think about when using multiple ashes of war is the type of ash we're going to be running. If you've watched my weapon arts calculation guide, you will know stat investment can greatly dictate the damage of some weapon arts. For example, if I replace Glintblade Phalanx with Flame of Redmane's, I can still get the 40 poise damage, which you can spam quicker than Phalanx, because Phalanx requires you to wait for the blades to fire off. However, because our build is intelligence, and Flame of Redmane's only scales to strength, its damage will be very pathetic. Next, let's introduce the star of the show, Carian Grandeur. Carian Grandeur has 3 stages, with each stage dealing increasing amounts of damage and poise damage. This is one of the options we're going to be using while waiting for the Phalanx to fire off. Do not get stuck by the idea that you must fully charge this ash. Even a first stage attack can do large amounts of damage. Treat this weapon art like an actual sword slice, akin to a heavy attack. However, if you do manage to land a level 3 Grandeur, you're going to be doing a lot of damage. Finally, Hoarfrost Stomp is a cold type ash. What that means for bullet art calculation is, it gets split into intelligence and dexterity scaling. For more information, review my Ash of War guide. This means that infusing it with magic infusion for our high intelligence, low dexterity stat distribution actually increases its damage over the cold infusion. As you can probably guess from these Ashes of War, the main idea is to stance break bosses in order to buy yourself time to fully charge a Carian Grandeur. Applying Frost with Hoarfrost Stomp is a bonus that will further increase our damage. As you can see from the gameplay video, you will only have time to land the Carian Grandeur without being able to critically strike the boss. This is perfectly fine. If you do have the boss's poise down and know exactly when you can start charging your Grandeur and let the Phalanx stun the boss, go ahead. However, the main point is to land a fully charged Grandeur on a boss while they're down. Why? Because when you hit a downed boss, you actually get a 20% damage boost. So instead of going for the critical strike, we're going to give our already high damaging Grandeur a 20% damage boost in order to combo the boss with a single powerful strike. Against regular enemies, we can just beat them with any of our ashes. Act according to the situation. For example, if an enemy is liable to jumping around, we might want to use Phalanx. If you're just fighting a single enemy, Grandeur will work just fine. If there are many enemies and you need an AoE, or if the enemy is huge or uses a shield, we can spam Hoarfrost Stomp. As for the starting class, Astrologer is your most optimized by far. Even by level 150, there is at least 4 levels of difference versus the second best class, Prisoner, which is quite a big deal if you think about it. Most builds by level 150 will usually only be seeing 1 or 2 levels of difference, but 4 levels means you'll feel the difference quite easily, especially during the early to mid phases of the game. This is especially true because this build isn't that easy to build on a new playthrough, since you need to upgrade 3 regular weapons. This is the full build. First, you will notice I'm using 3 daggers. I'm just picking the lightest ones as our Ashes of War are bullet arts, and it doesn't matter what weapons we're using. The offhand that uses Carian Grandeur is a Misericord, as it is also possible to critically strike when timed well, or you're too late for a fully charged Grandeur. I chose for Grandeur to be in the offhand as it is often a deliberate choice to use this ash, and you usually rotate between Phalanx and Hoarfrost Stomp otherwise. As for the armor, the pieces are chosen for fashion and to reach a passable amount of negation while still using the Spellblade set. Each piece of the Spellblade set gives you 2% bonus damage for weapon arts that do magic damage, which is all of our weapon arts. I am not running the full Spellblade set as it is very light, and 2% isn't huge. The negation you'll be getting is worth much more. Plus, I rather like the scaled armor with a Spellblade hat. Next, one thing to talk about is 38 Mind, which gives a total of 221 FP. A plus 12 flask gives you 220 FP. You can actually lower this if you don't have that many extended battles, or find that you have more than enough mind. I like to have mind relatively high for this build, especially at 150, because you're quite melee for an intelligence build. You can very often take damage, especially when charging a Grandeur at a bad time, or when you get greedy and want to just charge Grandeur up to its next stage. As such, I actually run quite a few HP flasks. I increased mine quite a bit because this build relies purely on ashes, and you can often miss things like Grandeur on more mobile enemies, so having a lot of FP helps. At lower levels, I also suggest running the Carian Filigree crest instead of the Godfrey icon if you're having trouble with FP. Do keep in mind that the Godfrey icon only works for fully charged spells and weapon arts, which means for our ashes, it only works for fully charged Carian Grandeur. It does also work for something else in the build though. Anyway, do keep in mind that even though the Godfrey icon can make a fully charged Grandeur even stronger, our overall damage doesn't actually increase by that much, because all our other ashes won't receive any benefits. Most of your attacks won't be fully charged Grandeur. It is perfectly fine to replace the Filigree crest here on this 150 build when you do not struggle with FP anymore. But prior to endgame, you probably want to keep the Filigree on. The other talismans are quite self-explanatory. Shard of Alexander in a weapon arts build is a no-brainer. And Dragon Crest Great Shield is just great for PvE while offsetting the downsides of our Magic Scorpion Charm, which buffs all our ashes damage. Okay, let's talk about the fourth weapon, which I've not mentioned yet. Carian Regal Scepter's spinning weapon is actually a unique weapon art. It is also not chargeable, but it deals quite a bit of damage, and even deals 22 poise damage. This is a nice to have when dealing with some melee targets, and just another toolkit in our bag. However, this is not the main focus of the staff. For this build, we're going to be running 2 spells to supplement this build. You're free to not run them in order to stick to the theme of the build. I just want you to know Terra Magica does indeed increase your weapon art damage by 35%, so if you want to see even bigger numbers, here it is. As for Rock Sling, there are just some PvE enemies like Renala or the Magic Dragon that has way high magic negation. They're just not fun to fight against as an intelligence-based build using magic attacks. That's where Rock Sling comes in. This is our main source of physical damage to deal with those pesky enemies. It also doubles up as our main long-range option. Since it also deals quite a bit of poise damage, you can also cast this spell while waiting for phalanxes to fire off in order to set up for Carian Grandeur by stance breaking the enemy. This spell can also be charged, so if you do run the Godfrey icon, charging this spell does give it the 15% bonus. Overall, you've got plenty of options to work around with to lead up to your combo. Just remember that your 3 daggers hold your main style, and get used to swapping around for different ashes. This build is very satisfying when you do pull the combo off, so give it some practice and you'll be surprised at the numbers you can pull off. As for the physic, Magic Shrouding Crack Tier is a must. It increases our magic damage by 20% for 3 minutes. Opaline Heart Tier is a very steady choice that allows us to make more mistakes. Feel free to replace this one. Like and subscribe. And if you want a customized build video of your own just like this one, you can buy my fantasy novel to support the channel, and send me proof of your purchase either on Discord or my Gmail. See you next time.